care about her.
Abducting somebody means that you care about her?
Yeah, in this situation.
Justice would be for you to come with me for about 5 minutes. Burn in hell.
Behind everyday routine and familiar faces lurk unspeakable horrors. From Joseph McAlpin's brutal greed to Lancy Hundley's hidden darkness, these killers shattered countless lives. Whether driven by twisted motives or pure malice, their crimes left families broken and communities scarred. Let's begin.
If you was man enough to go in there and rob and kill that family, why you not man enough to tell everybody in this courtroom what you did?
In 2017, a quiet family-owned car dealership in Cleveland, Ohio became the scene of a chilling crime. Joseph McAlpin walked through its doors with one plan in mind: stealing cars. But what happened next was far more horrifying than anyone could have imagined, leaving a family shattered and a community in shock. On a regular day at Mr. Cars, the owners, Michael Kuznick, and his wife, Trina Tomola Kuznick, were working hard to provide for their family. They had no idea that danger was about to walk through their door. McAlpin, along with 2 other men who waited nearby, came not just to take property, but to take lives. When the couple's son came to the dealership later that day, he was met with a heartbreaking scene. His parents were found dead inside the office with their pet. The police were called immediately. Detectives began piecing together what had happened. Surveillance footage and evidence pointed straight to McAlpin. Prosecutors said that after a serious incident involving the couple and their pet, McAlpin and his accomplices stole 2 cars and drove away, leaving behind devastation. As the case progressed, more details emerged. McAlpin had been the one to pull the trigger, while the other 2 waited down the street. The motive was simple. He wanted to steal vehicles. But in his attempt to take what wasn't his, he committed a brutal double killing. When the trial began, the evidence against him was overwhelming. Investigators learned that McAlpin planned the crime to get money and cars. Instead of walking away with quick cash, he left 2 people dead and destroyed a family's sense of safety forever. McAlpin was found guilty on all charges, including aggravated murder, aggravated robbery, burglary, kidnapping, and grand theft. He was sentenced to death.
Therefore, unanimously find that the sentence of death should be imposed on defendant Joseph McAlpin.
His execution was scheduled for May 19, 2026. However, recently, a court granted him a stay of execution, meaning the sentence will be delayed until all of his appeals and other legal processes are complete. As the family members of the defendant spoke, the defendant began to cry, realizing for the first time what it felt like for the victim's son to lose both parents in the place they had built together as a family. While justice was served in court, the pain of this loss will never fully go away. Our next case takes cruelty to another level. A killer who wouldn't stop until he got what he wanted.
What's the problem? I've been abducted. Who abducted you? Sean Green.
On September 16, 2016, police in Ashland, Ohio received a chilling emergency call from a woman who whispered that she was being held against her will. That call would uncover the horrifying crimes of Sean Great, a man later revealed to be a serial killer who had secretly terrorized northern Ohio for years. Sean Michael Great was born in 1976 and seemed, at first, like any other kid. He played sports, hung out with his neighbors, and came across as friendly to many. But behind closed doors, his family life was full of pain. His parents divorced when he was very young, and his mother left the family when he was just 11. These early wounds grew into deep anger and dark thoughts. As he grew older, Sean got in trouble with the law, including burglary and assault, but no one imagined the darkness that would follow. From 2006 to 2016, several women disappeared in Ohio. They were mothers, daughters, and friends. For years, their loved ones had no idea what happened to them. Everything changed that day in 2016. The brave woman who called an emergency had been tied up for 3 days, mistreated by Great inside an abandoned house. When police arrived, they rescued her and found the bodies of 2 other missing women hidden in the same house. The investigation grew quickly. Great confessed to killing 5 women. Authorities searched different counties, uncovering more victims, including a young mother named Dana Lowry, whose body had been unidentified for years. Great even led officers to more crime scenes himself. As detectives dug deeper, they learned that Sean had been living a double life. He pretended to be kind and helpful to gain trust, then turned violent. He strangled his victims and sometimes kept their bodies hidden near where he lived. In court documents, prosecutors described his actions as truly depraved and horrifying. During his trial, Great simply stated, "I apologized for my actions," and showed no remorse. In one shocking moment, he even claimed the victims were already gone in their minds because of hardships in their lives. The courtroom was filled with heartbreak as families heard the awful details of how their loved ones were treated. When asked why he committed these terrible acts, Great gave a strange explanation. He said he believed the government had taken over people's minds through assistance programs. He called it their bodies flopping wherever it can flop, showing he had created his twisted reasons to justify hurting innocent women.
No reason for anybody to know exactly who that man is because he's worthless.
In 2018, Sean Great was found guilty of killing Stacey Stanley and Elizabeth Griffith. He was sentenced to death for those crimes. However, he remained stone-faced, showing no regret for his actions. Later, he also pleaded guilty to the deaths of Rebecca Lacey, Candace Cunningham, and Dana Lowry. For these, he received multiple life sentences without any chance of parole. His appeals were denied, and the court decided there were no mistakes that could undo his death sentence. Though an execution date was set, ongoing legal processes delayed it further. Families of the victims expressed relief that he would never be free to harm anyone again. Police officers and prosecutors called it one of the most tragic and disturbing investigations they had ever faced. But amid so much darkness, there was also a moment of hope. The woman who bravely escaped and called for help saved her own life and uncovered the truth that had been hidden for so long. Her courage brought justice to families who had waited years for answers. Our next case is pure evil. A killer who hunted across state lines, leaving heartbreak wherever he went.
I was promised on the death penalty that in 7 years, the state of Florida would take care of this.
This is the chilling story of Glenn Edward Rogers, a man known as the cross-country killer. For nearly 3 decades, he drifted across America, blending in as a friendly stranger, while secretly leaving behind a trail of fear and heartbreak. From quiet towns to busy cities, no one knew when or where he would strike next, or who would fall victim to his deadly charm. Glenn's troubles began in early life. He left school before turning 16 and got married young. As the years went on, he faced allegations of mistreatment and became involved in crime. But it was in the 1990s when things turned truly alarming. Authorities started to connect him to the deaths of several women in different states. Women who trusted him, only to meet a tragic end. In 1995, a series of suspicious deaths brought Rogers to the attention of law enforcement nationwide. Investigators discovered he had been seen with women shortly before their lives were taken. One of the first clear links was to Sandra Gallagher in California. Sandra's life was cut short, and her vehicle was found burned near Rogers' apartment. From there, investigators tracked him across Mississippi, Florida, and Louisiana, where similar cases emerged. Police collected fingerprints, traced stolen property, and spoke with witnesses who had seen Rogers with the victims. When he was finally stopped in Kentucky after a long highway chase, he was driving a car that belonged to one of the women. His arrest made national headlines, and he was soon named on the FBI's 10 Most Wanted list. In court, Rogers faced trials in both Florida and California. The evidence against him included witness accounts, forensic proof, and patterns of behavior. He was convicted of killing in the deaths of Sandra Gallagher and Tina Marie Cribbs, and sentenced to death in each state. However, at the time of sentencing, he remained silent, even while in prison. Rogers filed many appeals, claiming mistakes had been made in his trial, but none of them changed the outcome.
He was convicted of murdering 2 women in Florida and California, but he was a suspect in several other murders.
While Rogers never offered a clear reason for his actions, prosecutors described him as someone who used charm to gain trust, then took advantage of the women he met. Some investigators believed he targeted people for financial gain or out of a desire for control. Rogers once even claimed he committed dozens of killings, though he later said he was only joking. After nearly 3 decades on death row, Glenn Rogers' final appeals were denied. In April 2025, the governor of Florida signed his death warrant. Rogers was executed by lethal injection on May 15, 2025. For numerous families who had lost someone dear, Rogers' execution offered a sense of comfort and finality. Some expressed that they could now find peace, knowing he would no longer pose a threat to anyone. Others believed that his passing was gentler than the suffering he had inflicted. Yet, after so many years of anticipation, the moment had finally come when they could begin to move forward. The next case shows that sometimes the most frightening conflicts occur within the very place that should feel the safest: home.
How did you feel at the time he touched you? I felt like I had to defend myself whether or not.
On December 20th, 2019, in Jacksonville, Florida, a day that started like any other ended in an unthinkable crime. Marcus Fishburne was staying with his roommate and the roommate's girlfriend, 25-year-old Aisha Levy. No one could imagine how this visit would end. That evening, Levy's boyfriend came home to a terrible scene. The apartment was covered in blood. The silence felt heavy and frightening. On the table, he found a note. Fishburne wrote that he and Levy were both dead and warned that the boyfriend would be next. The police were called right away. As they searched the home, they discovered Levy's body. She had been wrapped carefully and hidden inside a plastic storage bin, tucked away in a closet. It was clear that this was not an accident, but a planned act of cruelty. Detectives worked quickly to track Fishburne down. He was trying to run away on a Greyhound bus, but did not get far. Officers arrested him before he could leave the state. As investigators uncovered more about the case, troubling new details emerged. Fishburne had confronted Levy while she was getting out of the shower. He restrained her so she couldn't defend herself, then carried out a violent attack that tragically ended her life. Although Fishburne never clearly explained why he committed such a cruel act, the threats he left behind in his note showed anger and a desire to harm not only Levy, but also her boyfriend. The case went to court and the jury listened to all the evidence. 10 out of 12 jurors voted to recommend the death penalty. The judge agreed. Marcus Fishburne was officially sentenced to death on June 13, 2024 by a Duval County judge in Florida for killing Aisha Levy.
That the defendant be sentenced to death, and after assessing the proven aggravating factors and all of the mitigating circumstances.
However, he didn't show any guilt for his act. But this was not the end of his harmful actions. In 2022, while in prison, Fishburne attacked his cellmate by cutting his neck with a razor blade attached to a comb. He was given an additional 5 years in prison for that crime. Aisha's family will never be the same after losing her in such a tragic way. The courtroom was filled with sadness, anger, and relief that justice had finally been served. The case stands as a reminder of how quickly trust can be shattered and how important it is to speak up when someone shows sign of dangerous behavior. Our next case is about a drifter who used his charm to deceive, leaving sorrow and loss in every town he passed through.
Where the haystack in this sense is female DNA, and there might be some male DNA, the needles, but you may not be able to see them.
In November 2015, a terrible crime shook a quiet neighborhood in Youngstown, Ohio, leaving everyone in disbelief. A woman named Erica Huff, who used a wheelchair because of multiple sclerosis, lost her life in a brutal attack that shocked the entire community. On the morning of November 5th, Erica was home on Cleveland Street. Her mother was with her, and a visiting nurse came by. Later that day, the nurse left, and not long after, something unthinkable happened. Lance Hundley, a man who knew Erica, attacked her inside her own house. He beat her severely and also assaulted her mother. The conflict was so extreme that the home was set on fire while Erica and her mother were still inside. When emergency crews arrived, the house was in flames. Firefighters and officers rushed in and found Erica's mother unconscious from the beating. Erica herself had already passed away. Hundley was still inside the burning house and refused to come out. Officers pulled him to safety. Detectives began reconstructing the events and soon found traces of gasoline on Hundley's clothing. DNA evidence further linked him to the scene. Investigators concluded that Hundley had waited for the nurse to leave before carrying out the attack, a sign that the act had been carefully planned. In May 2018, after a long trial, a jury heard all the evidence. They listened to Erica's mother, who bravely testified about what she had experienced that day.
I'm on the couch. I couldn't see their face, and they was choking me out from behind.
Hundley tried to say that he had been attacked himself and claimed he woke up to see someone else in the home with a gas can. But the jury did not believe his story. They decided Hundley had planned and carried out this terrible act. Prosecutors argued that Hundley acted with prior calculation and design. The attack was not sudden or accidental. It was deliberate and intended to end Erica's life. Jurors recommended the death penalty. However, he remained emotionless. Judge Maureen Sweeney agreed and sentenced Hundley to death. The Ohio Supreme Court later reviewed the case and upheld the sentence, ruling that there was enough evidence to prove Hundley's guilt. This case left many people heartbroken. Erica Huff was a woman who faced health challenges every day, yet she lived her life with courage. The conflict she suffered was cruel and senseless. While her mother survived, she had to carry the memory of that day forever. The community still remembers Erica, and the ruling brought some measure of justice to her family. Wait to see our next case.
death penalty and nothing less.
What he did to my son before murdering him should be done to him. Eye for an eye.
Gut-wrench! In 2003, two young men, Jason Galehouse and Michael Wachholz, vanished from Tampa's vibrant community. Their families and friends hoped they would return safely, but those hopes were soon shattered when the truth about their fate was revealed. Jason and Michael were last seen alive in December 2003. Their sudden disappearance alarmed their loved ones, but no one could have imagined the horror they endured. Days later, Michael's body was found in his car in an apartment complex parking lot. Jason, however, was never found. Investigators later learned that he had been dismembered and his remains were discarded in dumpsters, making it impossible to recover his body. As police dug deeper into the case, they uncovered disturbing details. Stephen Lorenzo used dating apps and bars to meet his victims, often targeting those who were trusting and unsuspecting. Investigators found unsettling evidence on his computer, along with items in his home that raised serious concerns. Stephen Lorenzo and his accomplice, Scott Schweikert, had devised a scheme to manipulate and harm their victims. Their actions left a lasting impact on the lives of many and shocked the entire community.
After Mr. Galehouse was killed, his body was wrapped and put on a trailer in the driveway of Mr. Lorenzo's home.
Scott Schweikert, Lorenzo's accomplice, was a middle-aged man from Illinois who shared Lorenzo's sadistic interests. He later cooperated with investigators, providing detailed accounts of how the two planned and carried out their crimes, with Lorenzo taking the lead. Schweikert's testimony became the cornerstone of the prosecution's case, as he described the horrifying events that had taken place. A survivor, Albert Perkins, testified about his harrowing experience with Lorenzo. He recounted waking up restrained and unable to call for help. Despite the fear he endured, Albert bravely took the stand to share his story, shedding light on Lorenzo's harmful actions. His testimony was instrumental in exposing the extent of Lorenzo's cruelty and bringing the truth to light. For nearly 20 years, the victims' families waited for justice. Then, in December 2022, Stephen Lorenzo finally admitted to his crimes. At his sentencing hearing, he shocked everyone by welcoming the death penalty.
I'm seeking the death penalty. It's in my best interest, basically, because it's a comfort. The sooner I can fetch myself a new body and come back again.
But the judge, Christopher Sabella, made it clear that his decision had nothing to do with Lorenzo's wishes. This is the punishment you deserve for these horrific crimes, he declared. Jason Galehouse's mother, Pam Williams, who was battling terminal cancer, confronted Lorenzo in court with raw emotion. "I'm sick to my stomach just having to look at your disgusting face," she told him. Alongside her was Ruth Wachholz, Michael's mother, who had also waited 2 decades for this moment. On February 24, 2023, Stephen Lorenzo was sentenced to death. The courtroom was filled with emotions, relief, grief, and a sense of long overdue justice. Judge Sabella acknowledged the victims' families' pain, saying, "The thing that was consistent in their testimony is that they have been waiting 20 years for justice. Today, that long wait ends."
Ti condanno a morte. That translates to, I sentence you, Mr. Lorenzo, to death.
Though nothing can bring back Jason and Michael, their families can finally find some closure, knowing that the men responsible for their suffering will never harm another soul again. Lorenzo's case exposed a predator driven by cruelty. The next case shows that sometimes the most dangerous individuals aren't just killers. They're ideologues willing to take innocent lives for their own twisted beliefs.
After I found out he's getting the death penalty, I went outside and I hugged my friends and I started crying and I was just glad it was over.
On April 13, 2014, a quiet afternoon in Overland Park, Kansas turned into a scene of horror. Fraser Glenn Miller Jr., an 80-year-old man with a long history of controversial beliefs, tragically carried out an attack outside a Jewish community center and a nearby retirement home. His attack left 3 innocent people dead, none of whom were Jewish, despite his hateful intentions. Miller's path to violence started long before that day. Born in 1940, he once served as a U.S. Army veteran, but later in life, he became involved with divisive and controversial organizations. In the 1980s, he established a group called the White Patriot Party, which promoted exclusionary ideas and beliefs. He even sought public office to share his extreme viewpoints. He even ran for public office, hoping to spread his extreme beliefs. However, his activities eventually led to his arrest in 1987, when authorities found a stockpile of illegal weapons and explosives in his possession. He served time in prison, but never let go of his extremist views. By 2014, Miller was in poor health and believed he was dying. Instead of spending his last years peacefully, he planned a deadly attack. On that fateful April day, he drove to the Jewish Community Center and fired shots at people in the parking lot. He then moved to a nearby retirement home, continuing his rampage. His victims, William Corcoran and his 14-year-old grandson, Reet Underwood, were there for a singing competition. The third victim, Terry Lamano, was visiting her mother. They were Christians, not Jewish, proof that Miller's hatred was as senseless as his crime. After his arrest, Miller showed no guilt and appeared in court in a wheelchair. He shouted hateful slogans and even tried to justify his actions during his trial. The court found him guilty of capital murder and multiple other charges. A Kansas jury sentenced him to death, a punishment he openly accepted, claiming he was proud of what he did and said thank you. Miller remained on death row until May 3, 2021, when he died in prison at the age of 80. Officials stated that his death was due to natural causes. Though his life ended behind bars, the pain he caused to the victims' families remains. The story of Frazier Glenn Miller Jr. is a reminder of the dangers of hate and extremism. Innocent lives were lost because of one man's violent ideology. But in the end, justice prevailed, ensuring that his actions did not go unanswered. Our next case shows that sometimes the motive is even more chilling: senseless cruelty with no reason at all.
His internal life is going to be way worse than whatever he will deal with in this lifetime.
I didn't attend any of the court hearings. I couldn't bear to watch what my grandson endured before he was shot.
On November 11, 2022, 21-year-old Bryce Salter spent his evening at Y Bar and Bistro in Kalamazoo, Michigan. It was supposed to be just another night out, but when the evening came to an end, Bryce never made his way home. Hours passed and his family grew concerned. They didn't know that something terrible had happened outside the bar that night. Based on the information the press could gather, authorities were soon involved, and an investigation began into what had taken place. Bryce Salter was a young man full of life, known for his love of sports and fishing. He had a smile that could light up a room, according to his grandmother, Brenda Miles. But in just moments, his life was stolen by Lang, a man who had spent most of his adult life in and out of prison. Lang had been out of prison for only a few months when he managed to obtain a stolen gun. On that tragic night, he used it to take Bryce's life. The murder was brutal and completely unprovoked. He tragically shot and killed Salter. Surveillance footage revealed that Lang approached his car, where he encountered Salter. An argument ensued, during which Lang pointed a gun at Salter's chest, knocking him to the ground. Salter attempted to defend himself, but Lang fired multiple shots, resulting in Salter's death. Bryce's father, Brandon Salter, and other family members struggled to comprehend how someone could be so cruel. But what made the case even more disturbing was Lang's behavior during the trial.
Surveillance video shows the two men arguing when Lang took out a gun and knocked Salter to the ground. Salter fought back, but then Lang shot him.
Lang showed no shame for what he had done. During his sentencing hearing, he laughed as Bryce's family members delivered emotional victim impact statements. He mocked their pain, slumped in his chair, and smirked while Bryce's younger sister, Reese, spoke about how much her brother meant to her. Even after receiving his sentence, a minimum of 100 years in prison, Lang continued to smile. His attitude throughout the trial shocked not only Bryce's family but also the judge, who called Lang's actions senseless, cowardly, and merciless. Despite Lang's disturbing behavior, justice was served. The court handed him a sentence that ensured he would never walk free again. In addition to the 100-year sentence for second-degree murder, Lang received additional time for weapons charges. As the judge announced the verdict, the Salter family clapped with joy as Lang was sentenced.
70 years to a maximum of 100 years. Thank you.
As bailiffs dragged Lang out of the courtroom for his aggressive outbursts, one of Bryce's family members shouted, "How does it feel to know you're going to die in prison?" It was a powerful moment, one that brought a sense of closure to those who had suffered so much. Bryce's father, Brandon, called his son magic and said he had the perfect blend of everything: intelligence, kindness, and charm. His loss left a hole in their hearts that could never be filled. Bryce's sister Reese found the trial to be one of the hardest experiences of her life. Hearing the details of her brother's final moments was devastating, but seeing Lang mock their pain was even worse. In the end, the Salter family found some comfort in knowing that Lang would never harm another person again. While their pain will never fully fade, they could finally say that justice had been served for Bryce. Lang's lack of remorse was gut-wrenching, but what if a killer not only showed no regret but actively mocked the justice system? That's exactly what happened in our next case.
I didn't kill anyone. I'm not spending the rest of my life in prison for something I didn't do.
In 2007, the quiet town of Elyria, Ohio was shattered by a crime that no one saw coming. Dave Kowalczyk, the well-loved owner of Granny D's Pizza, was found murdered. a brutal and calculated act that sent shockwaves through the community. However, the true horror wasn't just in the crime itself, it was in the man behind it. Neil Simpson wasn't just a killer, he was cold, unrepentant, and dangerous. It started when Dave Kowalczyk's body was found in the pizza shop's back room, his hands tied behind his back. Police discovered security footage showing Simpson entering the shop that night. Investigators tracked Simpson to a nearby motel, where he was arrested within 48 hours. As the trial began, his chilling lack of remorse became clear. He didn't just deny his actions, he mocked the very system trying to bring him to justice. Spitting on jurors, hurling profanities, and showing no sign of regret, Simpson proved one thing: he wasn't sorry, and he never would be. From the beginning, the prosecution painted Simpson as a dangerous man. He had a history of trouble, a personality disorder, and a reputation for making reckless decisions. On the night of the murder, he was the leader of the group, the one in control. It was his plan, his decisions, and ultimately his actions that led to Kowalczyk's mourning death. The prosecution argued that the crime was deliberate, not impulsive. Simpson's past made him a threat to society, and they pushed for the death penalty. The defense, however, tried to shift the focus. They claimed his troubled childhood played a role in his actions. They argued that his upbringing shaped him into the man he became, and that should be considered in his sentencing. As the jury delivered their verdict, Simpson's face twisted with rage. Overcome with fury, he did the unthinkable. He spat at the jurors. Gasps echoed through the courtroom as officers swiftly escorted him out. His lawyers, scrambling to salvage the situation, pleaded for a mistrial, but the judge stood firm. 2 hours later, Simpson returned. His demeanor calmer, but his anger still simmering beneath the surface. He turned to the judge and offered an apology, but not to the jury. "I'm not mad at you," he admitted, his voice steady. "I'm mad at them." The courtroom was thick with tension as the jury left to deliberate. When Neil was seeking the death penalty for himself, hours passed, each minute stretching endlessly for Dave Kowalczyk's family. Would they choose the ultimate punishment? Would Neil Simpson be sent to death row for his brutal crime? After 4 agonizing hours, the jury returned. The room fell silent as Judge Mark Betleski prepared to read the verdict. Kowalczyk's family held their breath. Simpson, appearing through a grainy video feed from jail, sat motionless. His freshly shaven head and cold expression betrayed nothing. Then, the words came. Life in prison without the possibility of parole.
Due to election by the state of Ohio, on count 2, life in prison without the possibility of parole.
This was justice, but it would never bring Dave back. However, Simpson didn't flinch. No reaction, no shame, just the same blank stare, as if he had already resigned himself to his fate. A life behind bars, with nothing but time to think about the choices that led him there. Though he avoided the death penalty, his defense attorney believed the outcome was worse for him. Life in prison meant no second chances, no hope for freedom. While a death sentence would have given him years of appeals, this verdict left him with only one. His fight for freedom was effectively over. The prosecution stood by the jury's decision, calling it fair and just. The case was closed, and the community could finally move forward. This case is heartbreaking in many ways. A hardworking man lost his life over a senseless crime, leaving his family and loved ones in grief. The trial itself was difficult to watch, especially given Simpson's lack of repentance. While the justice system ensured he would never harm another person again, no sentence could truly make up for the loss of Dave Kowalczyk. His family will carry that pain forever. Neil Simpson may have escaped death row, but he'll spend the rest of his days behind bars, alone, with nothing but time to think about what he's done. The next case reveals how a man who was supposed to save lives turned into a cold-blooded murderer.
Meditated that there are any number of cases in which a defendant was sentenced to death in Nebraska where the prior conduct did not rise to the level of disregard this defendant has for the value of the life of another human being.
Anthony Garcia was once a promising medical student, but his career took a dark turn. Instead of saving lives, he ended up taking them. Between 2008 and 2013, he committed 2 separate double murders in Omaha, Nebraska. His victims were connected to his past failures, and his crimes shocked the community. Garcia had a troubling history in the medical field. After earning his degree, he struggled through multiple residencies, often being forced out due to unprofessional behavior. His time at Creighton University Medical Center was particularly disastrous. His professors found him arrogant and irresponsible, and he was eventually dismissed. Dr. William Hunter and Dr. Roger Brumbach, 2 senior figures at Creighton, played key roles in his termination. Years later, Garcia still held a grudge. Unable to build a successful medical career, he blamed those who had dismissed him. Then, in 2008, an unimaginable tragedy struck. On March 13, 2008, Dr. William Hunter returned home to find a horrifying scene. His 11-year-old son, Thomas Hunter, and the family's housekeeper, Shirley Sherman, had been brutally stabbed to death. The attack shook the community, but investigators struggled to find a suspect. Witnesses had seen a heavy-set man in a silver Honda near the home, but the case quickly went cold. For 5 years, the families had no answers. Then, in 2013, the killer struck again. On May 14, 2013, Dr. Roger and Mary Brumback were found murdered in their home. Roger had been shot multiple times and stabbed, while Mary had been stabbed to death. Once again, knives from the victim's kitchen had been used. Investigators immediately noticed the similarities to the 2008 murders. Their suspicions grew stronger when they discovered an attempted break-in at the home of Dr. Chanda Butra, another former Creighton professor who had classed with Garcia. It became clear that the killer was targeting former colleagues. Detectives began digging deeper into Garcia's background. They discovered that just before the Brumback's murders, he had purchased a firearm matching the type used in the crime. His credit card records placed him near the crime scene, and his phone had been used to search for the Brumback address. On July 15, 2013, authorities arrested Garcia while he was driving in Illinois. He was heavily intoxicated, and inside his car, police found a handgun. He was charged with 4 counts of first-degree murder.
Finally, in the fall of 2016, a trial. After 16 days of testimony, a jury found Garcia guilty of all 4 murders.
Garcia's trial began in October 2016. The prosecution presented overwhelming evidence, including DNA, surveillance footage, and even a chilling confession to an acquaintance where he bragged about killing a young boy and an older woman. Garcia showed little emotion throughout the trial, often wearing headphones and appearing uninterested. After weeks of testimony, the jury found him guilty on all counts. In September 2018, a panel of judges sentenced him to death.
Asleep or catatonic. That's how the attorney for revenge killer Anthony Garcia, eyes closed, hands cuffed. He had no reaction, barely any movement during the testimony.
He remained silent and even slept when the judge announced his death penalty. His crimes had been calculated, brutal, and fueled by revenge. The case of Anthony Garcia is a chilling reminder of how bitterness and resentment can turn deadly. Instead of moving on from his failures, he chose to take innocent lives. His victims were people who had once been part of his world, yet he saw them as obstacles rather than human beings. For the families of Thomas Hunter, Shirley Sherman, Roger Brumback, and Mary Brumback, justice was served, but their pain remains. No sentence can bring back their loved ones, but at least the man responsible can never harm anyone again. The hurtful actions of these individuals deeply affected many lives, leaving behind sorrow that may never fully fade. Their stories serve as powerful reminders that danger can sometimes hide behind familiar faces, and that the search for justice must go on, no matter how difficult the journey